Okay, Dad, I was thinking about different decades of your life, and I was wondering what was your favorite decade? For me, I was born in the 80s, so when I was growing up, I always thought about 80s was the best time for music, Michael Jackson, fashion, the 80s fashion. I always like when I see it on TV or movies, and just the time period of the 80s was interesting to me. It still is. And you see movies and TV shows all the time that are set in the 80s. So for you, what was your favorite time period growing up? What's your favorite decade?
That's funny you said the 80s because I didn't even think about the 80s. I should say something politically correct like the 80s was the best because Trent was born in the 80s. Nah, the 70s was the best. It's not even close. It is not even close. Um, I jogged down some movies just to so I don't forget because there's some movies that were blockbusters back in the 70s. And then I'll talk about music. The best decade for films in the story is the 70s. There's no doubt. It's undisputed. There's masterpieces. Some are excellent, some aren't, but man, they were great. So here's some of my favorite The Godfather. And if Ezra is watching this one day and he wants to look at old movies, the 70s is the time to go back and look. The Godfather was maybe one of my the favorite. It's hard because there's so many. There was Taxi Driver, Halloween. There was Godfather 1 and 2. Star Wars, that was episode 4, I think. Jaws, One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You know I like that. The Exorcist, that was scary. Then there was Rocky, which was, you look at it now, it looks silly, but back then, that was a big time movie. National Lampoon's Animal House. Carrie was one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. Deliverance. There was another one that was just crazy. That's when they did MASH. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know you've seen that, Trent. The Last Tango in Paris, Chinatown, The Deer Hunter. God, that was, that was Robert De Niro. I was in Vietnam, and you know, this was kind of one of those movies that everybody watched. Superman, of course, that was hard not to say it was my number one because I love Superman. American Graffiti, The Sting, Saturday Night Fever, and then came Clint Eastwood. And with all his movies, they were all, they're not all done, but the majority were done back in the 70s. I think like 71, he did Dirty Harry. I have a couple more. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The Outlaw Josie Wales. Smokey and the Bandit. That was popular. I didn't particularly like it. It was okay. It was entertaining. The Omen. High Plains Drifter. This is when he was doing. This is Clint Eastwood when he's doing spaghetti movies. French Connection, Poseidon Adventure, Enter the Dragon, All the President's Men. I got what? 4 more? 3
At the
more.
very end, 1979 was Star Wars. Or 77, sorry, 77.
Yeah, because we were in Germany. I remember going to the base theater to see that, me and your mom, and that was just crazy. That was crazy. There's so many good movies. The Bad News Bears, that's one that Ezra needs to watch early. Patton, that's old for him, but Play Misty for Me was another Clint Eastwood that he kind of went in a different direction. We started doing Dirty Harry and got away from the westerns. It was Airport. You remember that? Little Big Man. That was about it. I mean, there's so many. I was just thinking, Silver Streaks was done in 70. Do you remember that?
No.
That's Gene Wilder and I can't think of his name. Um, Black comedian. He died.
Oh, Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor. Remember? You don't remember that when they were walking into the prison? Those two guys together were so funny. I mean, it's just so much. There's so many films that were done in the 70s. God, as I sit here, films are just flying through my head. But it was great. That was a good time to go to the movie. I'm trying to think of one maybe you have seen. It's really famous. Darn it. I can't think of any right now, but there are so many. Like I said, I wrote these down, but there's just so many more. God. Oh, that movie Shampoo. That was entertaining. It was real popular, but it wasn't my kind of movie, but it was okay. Then there was Piranha. You never saw that one, have you?
I've seen clips of it.
Oh, okay. I mean, back in the days, it looks phony now. It'll probably look a whole lot phonier when Ezra starts watching it. But back in the day, that was, cinematography. Everything was back then. That was the way to do things. Like Jaws. You look at the clips from Jaws now and they make fun of it. But back in my days, that was scary. I wouldn't go in the water. In fact, that the is it Warner Brothers? Not Warner Brothers, but it was a movie.
Universal Studios.
Yeah, Universal Studios. You've been there, and they play that scene with Jaws coming up. It's fake and everything, but in your mind, you think this shark is gonna just come right out of the water. So that was really scary. So with the music, it was. I kind of went to the Motown sound. They were making like all the big things, and that's when I think the Jacksons started, because that's when they had ABC. You've heard that one, right?
Yeah,
that's when Michael
I thought
was
that
really
was the 60s.
small. And that may have been their first hit. I don't know. And then there was Smokey Robinson, and everything he did was really good. Tears of a Clown, and then him and Diana Ross. He liked Diana Ross, and so there was Diana Ross and Sly and the Family Stones, Mr. Big Stuff. These are some that I wrote down. The Temptations, Just My Imagination, Smiling Faces Sometimes, Undisputed Truth. A lot of these you've never heard of. I've told you about them, or I sent you clips sometimes, because these are kind of my favorites. Al Green, Let's Stay Together, Shy Lights, Oh Girl, the Staples Centers, I'll Take You There. All of these people are dead now. Gladys Knight and the Pips, they're still around. Stevie Wonder, still around. That he made, I think it was You Are the Sunshine of My Life. I just wrote these names down. I can't remember the songs. Dionne Warwick, the Spinners, the Stylistics. Stylistics were my favorite group. They were my absolute favorite group. Ferris, Lavelle. I think the Miracles were doing songs without Smokey Robinson, but they were pretty successful. Of course, there's Marvin Gaye. Barry White, the Floaters. You never heard of this one. It was Float On. Me and your mom were in Germany when they came out, and we saw them live on stage. The Commodores. That was Three Times a Lady was the big song back then, but they made quite a few during the 70s. And I guess my best female singer was Chaka Khan. And I think then was like I'm Every Woman. I'm not sure. Kool and the Gang. These are pop stars that are, they are just world famous. And these guys went out in the world and they made all of these songs, and it really made Motown. So Motown was big. The Marvelettes, Mary Wells, all of them, you know, the black music was just taking over and white people were listening to it. Because before then, I don't think there was a crossover. There was like white music and black music, you know, and white music was mostly country western and just kind of teeny bop stuff. Elvis Presley, you know, that kind of stuff. But when Motown came, they kind of set the scene and everybody liked them. Remember that Motown, was it 10, 20, 15 years, whatever it was, when Michael Jackson did the moonwalk?
Yeah, 25.
25. Remember that? Were there white people talking about Michael Jackson the next day? I mean, everybody was talking about Michael Jackson and what he did. And did you see, you know, these guys on TV and blah, blah, blah. Everything changed. Everything just changed with these artists. They changed how the perception of America was viewing music. And it wasn't just, you know, Elvis Presley and country western.
And that was at the beginning of the 80s, 1983, but they were taking a lot of 70s music.
That was, because the Jacksons were coming out of the 70s, but Michael, when he went by himself, it was the 80s where he kind of took over music, was selling 200 million albums and just ridiculous things. But his beginning was in the 70s with his brothers. And then at the end, remember that movie, Ben? That was... Ezra's got to see the movie Ben. It's about a rat. But that was a great movie. And I love that theme song. And I'll probably have it in my head all day today now, Ben. Oh, God. That was great. But was that the 70s or 80s?
That was the 70s because Michael Jackson was still, I think, a teenager.
Yeah, that was like the end of the 70s or coming to the end of the 70s. You're right, because he was a teenager. But that's when he started going out by himself.
Yeah, 1972.
Wow, you're kidding. Wow. I thought he did like ABC like 1970. So, yeah, 2 years later he made Ben? I didn't know that. I thought it was like the end of the 70s, but he's made so much and he's crossed, you know, these timelines. So it's just kind of hard. I mean, if he was still alive, he would still be making millions. He's just that talented. I watched Motown 25 yesterday. It was 2 hours long, and I watched every minute of it. And it was just amazing of all the people that, you know, were icons during their time frame. And that was like a 20-year period. Most of them, like Patti LaBelle. Gosh, she was out before you were born, and she's still singing. And everybody just flocks to see her. But she's not my favorite. She's more like, she has these gospel movements and screaming, and I'm not into that. I'm more the Smokey Robinson guy. So, you know, it's kind of hard to compare the rest of the time frame for me. The 60s was about hippies, you know. It wasn't really about black music, but black music was beginning to come out of the jazz area. And they were coming into the contemporary and rhythm and blues. So during the 60s, you saw James Brown, you know, the godfather of soul, Aretha Franklin. These were the ones that were the beginning of soul music. And I was young at that time, and I was listening to this Dramatics, another one of my favorite groups. Billy Stewart, you know, he's one of my favorite guys. That was all back in the 60s. And they were beginning that movement. And then the Philadelphia sound came. So there were artists out of Philadelphia. I think Patti LaBelle was originally Philadelphia. The OJs, the Whispers weren't. I'm trying to think of this one group that's really famous. I can't remember right now. God, it's so long ago. You're talking.
I looked up. Patti LaBelle is from Philadelphia.
Yeah. So she was one of... So look how old she is. That's 40, 50 years ago. Yeah. And she almost looks the same.
Yeah, she's 78. Currently, as we record this, she's 78 years old.
Wow. That's amazing. You've seen her, right? She still looks young. She doesn't look 70. She doesn't even come close to looking that. But the Intruders, these are groups that I really liked a lot. And when I was in Vietnam during the 60s, they would play their music over the radio. And you kind of, you would listen to that music all the time, and then it started drifting into the Motown thing. So things changed a little bit, and then in the 80s it really changed. So the crossovers, I think started in the 80s, where music was just crossing over, and it didn't matter what audience it was. It's just people start liking different kinds of music. I don't know when Charlie Pride was when he came out, but he was like the first black country western singer, and that was a big deal back then. Of course, black people didn't listen to him, but now, everybody just listens to all kinds of music. So things have changed a lot, but the 70s, there's no way that you could tell me or anybody else that wasn't the best era. The 70s for music and for
fashion.
For movies.
That's another thing that when you talk about the hippies in the 60s, the fashion of the 70s, for me, when I think about it, I wasn't alive then, but from what I've seen on TV and movies, it was bell bottoms. That's the bell bottoms and afros are the ones that stick out.
See, that came from the 60s, at the end of the 60s, and they were doing the hippie stuff and the big bell bottoms and platform shoes, and that's when what was the movie? Freddy's Dead.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You see those movies now and you laugh. Downtown Brown or whatever it was. Oh man. I watch some of them now and it's like, I like that movie. John Shaft. Man, there were just so many that was like, everybody was cool, wore leather jackets, sunglasses, bell bottoms, and platform shoes. And platform shoes. Remember Huggy Bear? He had platform shoes with goldfish in the heels. That was one ugly dude, Huggy Bear.